Over the last couple of seasons, the Montreal Canadiens have had some impeccable theatrics around the NHL Draft, and that trend definitely continued into 2024, so let's dig into it. At 5th overall, the Montreal Canadiens simply just took the next best option for me outside of Macklin Celebrini in Ivan Demidov. I have been talking about this guy for 2 years now. I love him. He's amazing. He's so much fun. He has a creative side that is unlike so many players at his age. I think he has a ton of potential with the Montreal Canadiens. I just cannot simply believe that he was there at 5th overall, but here we are. The Montreal Canadiens, I think, knocked it out of the park. They didn't have to think about it too much here, I don't think. Demidov's a great player. He'll be coming over relatively quickly. He'll be fine. I think he's going to fit in with what they have extremely well, and I think he adds some necessary firepower that they've kind of said no to over the last couple of years. And let me tell you, when they announced that Celine Dion was going to make the pick on Ivan Demidov, it was one of the craziest couple of minutes that I experienced at the NHL Draft. The reaction started out pretty quiet, and then a split second later, the place erupted into applause. She showed up, worked her way through her announcement of the pick with Ivan Demidov's name, but did a great job. So kudos to the Montreal Canadiens for bringing a bit of theatrics to Sphere. We're in Vegas, so why not? I thought it was a great move, and to do it to pick Ivan Demidov, that could be great content for a very long time. At 21st overall, the Montreal Canadiens used a pick on Michael Hage, and this is a player that I had ranked at 21st overall, so take that for what you will. I like Michael Hage. Super fun player, really high skill, plenty of determination, loves to have the puck on his stick, drove a lot of good results for the Chicago Steel, who had a really rough first half of the season, and then Hage basically put them on his back and carried them into the playoffs. I think he's a really interesting player. I don't know what position he'll play in the NHL at the end of the day, but I do think that he could at the very least be a very good offensive skilled winger that can create both passes and shot attempts that could be threatening in the NHL. And honestly, I would be surprised if he lasted that many picks after this, so for Montreal to be trading up before the draft and then landing Michael Hage with that pick might look pretty good in retrospect, because I think the upside with Hage is really high. At 70th overall, the Montreal Canadiens took Atos Koivu. Now, it would be easy to look at that pick and then look out the side of your eye and go, but Saku Koivu's son, is that the best player there? And I think there's a shred of truth to that, but I don't mind Atos Koivu. Every time I watched him this year, I came away going, all right, smart player, moves the puck pretty well, doesn't really make that many bad decisions, but needs to fill out, needs to get stronger, needs to get quicker. All the basics that a young player basically needs to develop, but there is a strong mind for the game around him. And again, he's one of these guys you can tell is the son of an NHL player. He just seems to have a really good grasp of the game, and if Montreal really believes in their development team, then maybe they have something here in Koivu. I think he could be an interesting bottom six center, maybe a winger at the next level, but at 70th overall, sure, I get it. If you have a really good inside track on him and you think he's going to develop well for you, I have no problems with that. At 78th, they drafted Logan Sawyer, and I watched Sawyer a little bit over the course of this season, and he just didn't really blow me away. And just as a personal rule, when looking at Junior A players in North America, you gotta really look elite in order for me to really value you. And unfortunately, I don't really see that with Logan Sawyer right now, but hey, I said the same thing about Aiden Fink last year, and he had a great freshman year with Penn State. Sawyer's an interesting player. I think he's pretty smart. He's got a decent shot on him. He's got some good timing on his playmaking. I just wasn't blown away with him enough to make him a top 100 pick, and I feel like at 78 there were some better options. But I can't judge. He's an interesting player, very productive, and we'll see how things go for him in college. At 102nd, the Montreal Canadiens again went to the Hamilton/Brantford Bulldogs organization and drafted Owen Protz, and this is a player that I had never seen before, so when I looked at him after the draft, I came away going, okay, I don't know what to tell you about him. He has some decent feet under him. He has a decent shot from the point that he uses relatively often. He's got a physical edge that I think is what draws Montreal to him, and this happens all the time, where a team will get some good players from a specific organization in junior hockey, probably maintaining that relationship and going, who else would you recommend? And the name that comes up might be Owen Protz, and so they give him a pick, and he's the 5th name they drafted. If he turns out to be anything, great. Again, I just wasn't really blown away with his game, but there were some areas where I thought, okay, I can see why you would draft this player, and there's value in that. At 130th, they drafted a re-entry in Tyler Thorpe, and there were some people out there who said that Thorpe was one of the better re-entry players available this year, and honestly, I don't exactly see it the same way. He's definitely big, he's definitely very resilient, a very physical player, both on and off the puck, and I think there is value in that. I just don't know about the pace and the offensive skill really projecting to the next level. But again, 130th overall, if he's a guy that ends up on your fourth line that can grind along the boards, fine. I just didn't see enough out of him that made me see him as positively as some others did. But Montreal seems to really like to bet on these bigger, more physical players to round out their lineup, and we'll see how it goes. At 134th overall, they drafted Mikas Vekvanongs, and I am never going to question Montreal's ability to draft goaltenders because they've drafted quite a few in the last few years, and they've looked decent since then, and I really liked Vekvanongs this year. I know some people are going, oh my god, they drafted some kid playing in the Latvian league. It's not the highest level of hockey ever, but I watched this guy play a few games, and his numbers were really, really good, and you can see why. He's athletic, he gets around the net really effectively, he tracks play pretty well, and I mean, considering that the Latvian team faced a lot of shots at the under-18 tournament and he turned away a decent share of them in heavy workloads, I think he did perfectly fine. And it's nice to see a player like him get drafted out of a bit of a place that's off the beaten track. I do think that there's a bit of a long shot quality here to him, but based on what I have seen at the levels in which I have seen him, I think he was a pretty decent pick, and I think Habs fans should be curious about this guy. At 166th, the Montreal Canadiens drafted Ben Merrill. Now, the only tape I could find of him was when he played with the Chicago Steel this year for 2 games. I think he's a real long shot. He's got a lot of size, but I think the skating is really not there. There's not a whole lot of pace in his game. He seemed to struggle with just how fast the USHL was relative to prep school hockey, and he wasn't able to really rely on his physical tools as much as I think he would at the prep school level. That said, he can absolutely hammer a hockey puck, so that's a plus as well. It'll just be a matter of what happens to him in college. I would think he's a bit of a long shot considering his age and his trajectory to this point, but I mean, it's 166th overall, so I'm not gonna make fun of this pick at all. At 210th overall, Montreal went to Russia and drafted Makar Hanin from Dynamo St. Petersburg in the 2nd Division. Now, I've seen Hanin here and there because he was one of the most productive re-entry players playing at that level. And I mean, look, I think he's a player that leads with his shot, he shoots the puck a lot, but didn't really bring the skating ability, the speed, the pace, or the agility necessary, I think, for a player like that to project to the NHL super easily. But he did have a pretty good season production-wise, and Nikolai Bobrov seems to think that he has a pretty bright future ahead of him, so who am I to judge? It's 210th overall, so have some fun, draft the guy out of Russia that you think could be a thing. I might not see it the same way, but he's an interesting player, and I think it was a nice thing to see him picked. With the second last selection in the entire draft, the Montreal Canadiens went to Sweden and drafted Rasmus Bergqvist. I watched a little bit of Bergqvist. I don't have a ton to really report on him. He's got some size, he's got some good defensive instincts from what I saw. I just didn't see a player that moved the needle enough for me to really want to draft him, but there were a lot of players like that in this draft, so I guess Montreal just kind of looked at a scout and said, who do you like? And they said Bergqvist. For a guy who was undrafted last year, I didn't see much that really gave me a whole lot of confidence to say, yeah, this is a guy that should have been drafted last year, but again, if you get anything with one of these picks, great. I just think that Bergqvist is a guy that doesn't have a whole lot to note, but the instincts are decent defensively, and he can move the puck competently, I suppose, but I don't really have a whole lot to say about him to this point. So the Montreal Canadiens get a 1D from me. You get Ivan Demidov at 5. It's great. I think that could work out and be a franchise-altering piece for them, at least in an offensive sense. I think Michael Hage adds a great dimension to the team as well in terms of offense that I think their prospect pool could use a little bit more of. Koivu is an interesting foundation to work with. I just think he's a little bit of an unsure thing to bet on that quickly in the draft. Same goes for Logan Sawyer. Maybe there's something with Owen Protz that I might be missing. And I like the pick of Vekvanongs in net. I think you leave him over in Europe for a little while and see what happens with him, but I think there is a lot of upside there. For me, though, I think I might have aimed a little bit differently on a few of these picks, especially outside the first round if I'm the Montreal Canadiens, but that's okay. I think the Montreal Canadiens will really enjoy the players they drafted in the first round, and I think there's a chance that some of the players that are outside the first round could fill in the roster in a given role down the line. It just might be a little bit of a ways away if it ever happens. But all in all, I think the Montreal Canadiens came away with some really great talent that will benefit their team for a long time. So they end up near the top of the leaderboard, but not quite right up with what I think were the best of all of them. So that's it for the Montreal Canadiens. If you liked the video, you can go to our description box where you can get our Fanatics affiliate link, where anything you buy in the shop with that link will give us a small kickback on anything. Or you could go to Scouching.ca, where a subscription will get you access to a private Discord server, as well as data tables for drafted and undrafted prospects that you won't find anywhere else. So you can check all that out at Scouching.ca. So that is it for the Montreal Canadiens, and up next we look at the Calgary Flames.